Whakataketehu ki te uru, whakataketehu ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atikura, he tio, he huka, he hu, he Māori oro. Welcome everyone to today's City Strategy and Delivery Committee meeting. Please let me or the Democracy Advisor know if you intend to leave the meeting. Morning tea will be around 10:30. Do we have any apologies? Poe Hoya for lateness. Anyone else?
No.
Yes.
Councillor Randall, who's not.
He's online. Cool. I'll move the motion. And do I have a second? Jody, Councillor Rocha. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favor, please press 1, not 2. I declare the motion carried. Conflict of interest declaration. I call on members to declare any conflict of interest that they might have in relation to the item on the agenda. Now, confirmation of minutes. Approve the minutes of the City Strategy and Delivery Committee meeting on 11th of December, having been circulated, and that they've been taken as read and confirmed as an accurate record of the meeting. I move the motion, and Councillor Matua will second. And I'll put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favor, please press 1. You used to do that, right? Motion carried. Items not on the agenda. There are no items on the agenda. Not on the agenda, yeah. General business. Now, cool. We have 2 public participants, and first will be Geraldine Murphy from Inner City Wellington on the agenda item 2.1. Please, Geraldine, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes, including question time.
Kia ora koutou. Yes, I'm Geraldine, I'm spokesperson on seismic matters for Inner City Wellington. I just want to talk to the draft submission that has been made for the submission to the Earthquake-Prone Buildings Amendment Bill. ICW supports the proposed changes in the direction of the amendments to the bill and to the earthquake-prone building policy and the introduction of a more targeted, pragmatic and proportionate system. But apartment owners continue to be the group who are most impacted, even under these new changes. We agree with many of the points made in the WCC submission and have a few that we want to highlight. The first is about the assistance for building owners, and particularly apartment building owners. We're really pleased to see that submission acknowledges that the impacts and ongoing risks for apartment owners and the inclusions of some options for the government to consider for support. But we believe that this section needs to be stronger, given the review report's review frequently highlights the ongoing financial constraints and risks of non-compliance that are facing many apartment owners, and the absence of any financial or implementation support from the government. Enforcement will still be Wellington City Council's responsibility, when the reality is that many of these owners have no or limited options to comply. So increasing offence provisions or having a pathway for a more workable enforcement strategy will not help these owners comply. If some owners find it uneconomic to do, the proposal's uneconomic, or they can't get the money. Passing the current bill knowing that some owners will not be able to comply is irresponsible legislation and will result in the same outcomes for these owners and for WCC. The fundamental problem is that these changes are being made once again without any detailed analysis of the impact on the regulatory impacts on the different groups of apartment owners, of regulated parties. Apartment owners are not the same as commercial owners, they're not the same as the Crown, and they're not the same as territorial authorities. And not addressing these differences between the regulated parties is going to lead to the same outcomes that we're already getting. So there needs to be a funding and an implementation model that reflects the differences between these owner groups, and this has never been done. In 2016 it wasn't done, in 2004 it wasn't done, and that is why we are still here facing these same outcomes for this group of owners. They've always faced this outcome, and now it's continuing. So I think the submission really needs to stress that, because it's going to come back to this council to address, and it's just not workable. You know, I've already said it, the current system's not working, so continuing to do that, it's not going to change the outcome. So I think that's my main feedback, is to really strengthen that, to really call it out, that there needs to be more work done. I think the other couple of areas I'd like to talk about is the identified any time provision, that we're concerned about. Officers are currently reviewing historic assessments for an unknown number of buildings. This seems to be contrary to the intent of the proposed legislation to provide more certainty to owners. And looks like WCC is preempting what the proposed more restricted mandate around this provision, and to have a further round of assessments for some buildings. And I think WCC's process, you know, has, following the 2004 Building Act, resulted in thousands of building owners getting potentially earthquake-prone building letters, and from memory, thousands of buildings being put on the council's own earthquake-prone building list. So it's not as if it wasn't done very thoroughly at the time, and I think the review identified that this identified any time provision that's in the current legislation was, the use of it by TAs had gone beyond the intended scope of that provision and resulted in many more buildings being identified as earthquake prone that were never intended to be picked up. So it is really concerning that this is happening. There needs to be, evidence as why it has been done, how many buildings, because I'm sure buildings have already been picked up through this process already, so there's another round going on. So that really is concerning. We're raising concerns about the proposed identified any time provision in the bill, because we feel it is very open as to the criteria that councils can use to say, this building here, this pre-1976 building, we think it is, we should be looked at again. And, well, that's post-1976, sorry. But there's also no criteria in the bill for the basis for what MB will use to decline or approve that recommendation from a TA. So I think it's still a bit open in terms of how it's going to be used going forward. The other deadline provision we'd like to talk about is deadline extensions and the proposal to restrict it to 5 years in total. And we don't support this proposal. The bill proposes that TAs would use criteria, and they've got a number identified already, under which an application for an extension can be assessed, and including placing conditions on the owners for that extension to continue in that case. So there is already the ability to, if the owner comes and says, well, we'd like 15 years extension, please. I mean, that's not going to happen, sort of thing. There's a number of criteria that councils can use to say, well, we'll look at that. You could have 5, you could have 1 or 2, whatever it is. So I think to cut it back to 5 years at this point, I don't think when there's actually quite a strong scope for enforcement or for discretion by councils, we don't think is appropriate either. So those are the three main areas in the bill and in your submission that I would like to highlight and really encourage you to be more forceful around the impacts on apartment owners, the lack of support, and the fact that for many of these buildings, and we all know of them, and particularly the most prevalent one, it's just uneconomic. And what's going to happen to those buildings where it's just uneconomic? Are those owners really going to take them to court? Take over the building? So the government has to come up and do something about this, because otherwise the buildings just won't be strengthened. And these owners, they're just homeowners, a lot of them, so we can't leave it where it is. It just has to be changed.
Thank you, Geraldine. You finished, or any questions? Councillor Chang.
Thanks very much, Geraldine. You were talking about setting up a funding mechanism for these apartment owners. Would you envisage that be done by central government, or do you think that local government should have some part to play in that? Because it is I agree, it's a considerable problem.
Yeah. I think central government has to front up and provide, I think, the bulk of this, the funding, but there might be the expectation that TAs front up as well. I mean, that was the case under other situations, such as the weather tightness issue, where it was 50% owners, 25% Crown, 25% TAs. And I think owners are not expecting the full amount, but there's a shared risk here, and there should be a shared cost. So I think the government, it's their policy, they have to front up and do the bulk of it, I think, and they have to work out how this is going to be achieved.
No, Councillor Compton, quick question.
Thank you for coming in. Just a quick one. With higher density housing and more apartments going up within Wellington, do you foresee this issue growing over time?
Well, in theory, it shouldn't grow, because the change to this provision is to stop this the ongoing sort of rollout of this. We're going to identify you as earthquake-prone buildings. So this is a sort of the end of the earthquake-prone building issue, because these buildings, once they're done, they can't be picked up again and done again. Though, of course, any government can decide what it's going to do and change the law, I suppose. But that's the intent, is that these are the last buildings that are the most at risk, which was always supposed to be the scope of this legislation. And so once these are done, that should be it. There is provision to identify post-1976 buildings that are particularly issue, and this is because of the CTV type building in Christchurch. So there might be some picked up there, but there shouldn't be like another swathe of buildings being picked up. So and apartment buildings are the largest number of buildings. The residential buildings are the largest number of buildings in the two categories, with unreinforced masonry and the concrete 3+. In the metropolitan centres, there were 150, and the next group was sort of 89 commercial buildings. So residential are the most impacted buildings out in those main centres. And I think, and the thing about residential owners, they talk about residential buildings, but they're quite diverse. I know I'm running out of time. Quite diverse groups of owners. Some will be owner-occupiers, some will be commercial rental landlords, some will be community housing providers and things like that. So none of that has been investigated and, sort of understood.
Thank you.
It's always been the problem.
Thank you, Geraldine from Inner City. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sylvia Allen from Wellington City Trust and the Save the CD2C Bridge Group. You have 10 minutes as well, Sylvia.
So, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, the Mayor, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of the Civic Trust and the very large and loose group of people who call themselves the Save the City to Sea Bridge Group. I've come along to say on behalf of all these people, thank you for making the decision to reverse the previous council's decision to demolish the bridge and the associated structures, capital E and the Nico Processional Way. Together, these and their associated artworks form an absolutely iconic part of the identity of Wellington. The support that we gained while trying to keep the bridge came not just from Wellington residents, but regionally, nationally, and even internationally. As a number of our supporters pointed out, there is nothing else like it in the world, and people are very grateful that this council has been able to change its mind so that the bridge will survive well into the future. We appreciate the speed with which enough work has been done for you to have recommendations in front of you now and to minimise any delay or uncertainty in restoring the bridge. There are a couple of points we wish to make. Of the two options before you, option 2 is to be preferred, we think, as it limits further deterioration of the capital E space, which could cause further problems in future. We generally agree that option 2, as stated in the report, which is a cold shell state, provides the best value to benefit proposition. It also holds out the prospect for some future low-key use of capital E and may help bring more people back into the area. However, there is one major issue remaining that's very unclear to us, and that is the future of the bridge artworks. Their remediation is essential. We did hear at your workshop last week that all, and this is a quote from James Roberts, all artwork to be retained and refurbished. We're very concerned about the proposals in the Warren and Marnie Landscape Design Report, page 413 onwards of your agenda. There are a great many weasel words in that report that gloss over the intended loss of artwork that make the City to Sea Bridge what it is. We are asking you, councillors, not to agree with this loss. What is being lost? All the wonderful paving that clads the top of the bridge and its story patterns telling the Maori story, conceived by Maori woman artist Toi Te Rito Mahi, alongside Rory Thompson, the architect, one of the architects of the bridge, including the fishhook in the grassed area and the remaining part of Maui's net, which spread out from the waveform on the bridge into the Civic Square, and most of which has now been lost. We read in the report at page 424 of your agenda that all orange tiles are to be removed. A completely new paving design is proposed. The art in the pavers is not recognised. And why not retain and repair as promised? What is happening to the work of the second significant Maori artist, Matt Pini, his prow and capital at the foot of the stairs? We cannot tell from the report, but the remaining sail, which was part of the waka, 2 sails, is apparently being consigned to the dustbin. The much-loved Parramatta work, timber sculptures, columns, seats, etc., that people really love, and we do acknowledge that some people don't love them very much at all, but most people do. We cannot find any mention of them in the whole report, so we don't know what their future is. So to conclude, we're very glad that you're keeping the bridge and ensuring its future. However, we're very distressed at the prospect that the artwork, which is an integral and irreplaceable part of the bridge, seems as though it may be lost. We don't think councillors are aware of this, and we ask you to make sure that this does not happen. That's what I have to say. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Sylvia. Now, Councillor Corbett.
Thank you. I was just interested in your comments about the tiles, and I'm actually quite keen to ask our officers about why, other than the colour scheme, why are we changing the tiles on the City to Sea Bridge? I know the new Tanaka Civic Square, the flatbed, is all newly tiled with different colours, so I'm not sure if that's got something to do with it. But did you have a view if, you've got the grey tiles and then you've got the terracotta? I'm not...
So the Civic Trust, when we realised that the strengthening of the underground car park was being done from the surface, the Civic Trust actually asked what was happening to the tiles, and we were told in writing that they were being carefully removed and stored and would be replaced in the same way. That hasn't happened, obviously. And we recognise the point that you've made that half of it's already lost, but I think good design and careful choice of materials and things should be possible to retain what we've got and blend it in with the new surface of the square, which we haven't really seen yet. But yes, we'd like to see as much as possible retained, because it is important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I don't think we have any other questions, but really appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks. What's next? What page was that before? Okay. Please welcome Liam and Jenny Chapper to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillors, I just want to introduce Jenny Tippler, who is the Resilient Buildings Manager. You may have certainly seen Jenny before. We had a workshop, I believe, just before Christmas, and she runs the Resilient Buildings team, so we have a collection of case managers that look after the various buildings that are earthquake prone. We do quite a bit of work, as Geraldine indicated in her submission, with owners via our case management process, but happy to answer questions. This has been a very compressed time frame, so I want to firstly acknowledge that, and a very, very complicated piece of legislation. So we'll try to keep the answers as untechnical as possible, but we're happy to do a deep dive. Thank you.
First, Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, look, I just want to follow up from Geraldine Murphy's presentation to us, and just whether, given what's been raised, given what's already in the submission, is there any thoughts from officers in terms of that, or is it sort of too late to incorporate anything else, or it's being addressed, or any suggestions of how we could take this forward?
Yes, the submission is due on the 16th of February, so there is still time to make amendments. One thought that I had with regard to strengthening the section about residential apartment owners was just to highlight some of the statistics. An example would be while the number of earthquake-prone residential buildings is expected to more than halve, if you look at the number of residential units and the number of residents impacted, it's actually a much smaller reduction. It goes from about 1,600 units to 1,300 units, which is quite a lot, quite different to the number that just you hear from. It's half the number of buildings that contain residential. So we could certainly look to strengthen it through those kinds of examples.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tivenbacher.
Mine's pretty much along the same lines. I mean, obviously, this is a one one chance basically to try and influence the way the bill's written to start with. And obviously there are some concerns from Inner City Wellington that it doesn't give enough protection for a good amount of Wellingtonians. So I guess I would just say, look, maybe we should be speaking to Inner City Wellington and finding out where we can make it as firm as possible, because it can't hurt to be firm when it comes to these things. If that wasn't really a question, by the way, but could we? There you go, that's a question.
Yeah, and look, I think we certainly want to make it clear that the plight of apartment owners is real and will have a large impact on the city if there's not more support or ways to enable them to comply, especially given that the bill doesn't propose any changes to the enforcement tools. What we have in terms of enforcement are just these really strong and really blunt tools, and that doesn't mesh particularly well when you've got a group of owners who may wish to comply but are not able to.
Councillor Fawn.
Yeah, kia ora, this is more a process question. Do we need to provide an amendment? I can't see the recommendations that the Chief Planning Officer can make minor editorial changes. So would that fit under that? Great.
Councillor Rubai.
Thank you. I've got two questions, and perhaps on the same line as Councillor Foons. Could we suggest that the council puts a resolution through to support Inner City Wellington's submission, as well as making minor amendments to ours? And could we then make that stronger in highlighting the fact of the lack of financial support to encourage the government to fix this problem on their end for residential owners? Because I am quite aware that it's a huge ask, and sometimes in the hundreds of thousands for pensioners that can no longer afford to. Fantastic, thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Chang.
Thanks very much. Regarding the plight of the individual apartment owners, if they're unable to afford their share of strengthening the building, what is their option? Does the body corporate then say that, well, you can't live in here anymore and they need to move out, or what are their options if they can't find the money?
So this gets into Unit Title Act provisions, and so if the body corporate has decided to go ahead with strengthening and they've decided to levy funds from owners to fund that, and owners are unable to pay, then the body corporate, I understand, is able to essentially force the sale of the apartment if owners are unable to pay.
Thank you. There is no further questions, and thanks to Jenny and Liam. The remover for the motion, Councillor Arubai. Do you want to speak?
Yeah, if I may. I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Geraldine Murphy and Inner City Wellington in terms of this work. I am very aware of the struggle of residential owners who, as I said before, that could be pensioners, and this could be their last home in retirement and can no longer comply or afford to comply, but they do wish to. I do also recognise that some of them aren't able to sell their homes to solve the problem, because it's not up to standard to sell and get them some sort of profit on that. So I do really acknowledge those struggles. And thank you to the Wellington City Council team for putting together a submission that does reflect the community's input and feedback, and for being so open to make those changes to help support our community who share their lived experience with us. So I do acknowledge that. I do want to make one quick point. If it is possible in the future, after the bill comes into law and those changes are made and finalised, is that for Wellington City Council to investigate any solutions feasible to us around supporting these owners and navigating those changes and systems within the local government sort of enforcement space and the central government laws. If that would be incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Rubai. Is there a seconder for the motion? Deputy Mayor McNulty, do you want to speak? Okay. Is there any further debate? Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Yeah, I just want some clarity. So if we do vote yes for the submission, are we voting yes for us to take in some additional wording for Inner City Wellington's concerns? I'm just nervous that we vote yes and then we don't actually get satisfaction for the group.
Thank you for your speech, and I think Liam already nodded, and that means it's yes. Right of reply. I don't see anyone else putting their hands up. Right of reply, Councillor Rubai, or no?
I'd like to reserve my right. Thanks.
I now put the motion, which has been moved and seconded, and please vote.
That's a yes from me.
Noted. I declare the motion carried. Agenda item 2.2, significant projects, quarter 2 status report. Please welcome Jenny Chetwood and Jeffrey Cole to introduce the report.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Jeffrey Coe. Yes, I'm the manager of the PMO at Council. So I will make this very brief, largely take the report as read, but very briefly, this is the second quarterly report on significant projects that's coming to this committee this triennium. We've taken feedback from the previous report and conversation that you had back in December, made some improvements to the report. The main area really I'll touch on is around a specific focus on the critical and high risks and issues recorded against these projects as per our project risk standard at Council. So we've had that expectation that project managers are summarising what those critical and high risks and issues are specifically and the status of their management, rather than a generic risk statement and issue statement that we've had in the previous round. So just trying to hone in on those critical risks issues as per our risk standard to help you focus on what the salient points are for you. And tried to make some other improvements to the general content of the report as well. I'll leave it there, happy to answer questions. The accountable SROs for each of the projects are available today as well to answer questions if you have questions on the projects themselves.
Thank you. And does anyone have any questions before we move to a debate? But I just want to flag that it's good to focus on the agenda item, even though there are some interests in some other areas where people would be interested to ask questions. My preference is just to focus on today's agenda item. And Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Kia ora. I'd just like to get a bit of clarity on the sludge plant moving back into red. There's been some media comments this morning as well. So we've moved from amber back into red this cycle. Can you please just explain the drivers of that and assurances around those drivers?
For sure. Thank you. Through you, Chair. So we have flagged the SMF plant as red in the report, as you've noted. We're doing that because it's really important that we're fully transparent with what's going on. So we're just trying to make sure that we are very clear with the project. What's driving the red at the moment are the impact of quite a few external factors on the construction program. And I think, as we've noted in the program, those things are things like application of cladding to the building, the facade. The base plates have got some issues with some of the quality of the concrete. There are some issues with some of the way that Becker is, or the JV is working. And there was an issue that you'll be aware of around our relationship with Wellington Electricity. Yeah, and that one was around agreeing with them a date for their upgrades to their substation to power the SMF site. The risk around that was we just weren't getting agreement from Wellington Electricity to a date, so we couldn't work on that. So I'm pleased to let you know that's been resolved. So we have addressed that completely, and we are now fully on board with Wellington Electricity, and that risk has gone off the risk register now in terms of being an impact on the program. And the other issues are being worked through by the project director, who's just recently been appointed, a new one there. So I'm flagging the issues as red, but I'm confident that these issues are being managed actively by the project director and being brought back into the program overall. So that's why I'm flagging them.
Thank you. Yeah, you just made a few references to the project director who understand who's come on. Will it be possible for councillors to have a session with the project director? I know we've got, for instance, Will Pete's going to come in to talk about Te Aki Wai. Just we're getting that from the horse's mouth discussion. Is that something we'd also be able to do with the project director?
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to arrange that if that's what councillors.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. That would be good, and we will work on that. Anyone else? Councillor Carvett? Yep.
Okay, I might have to go around for the second round, but thank you for the improvements to the quarterly report. I saw there's a bit more about current or critical and high risks and issues. I still would like you to go a bit further, but I'll take that offline. I would be really keen to see a trend of the RAG, the sort of red, amber, green. We've got the current status, but for us, it's also interesting to see the trend. Have we been in red all year? Have we moved from amber to red to amber, so that we understand the progress, or if we are making progress?
Yep, we could definitely look at doing that. We did add this time around what the previous status was in the forecast for next reporting period, but we can look at how that longer term trend.
I think that might be quite good for the reporting year. My next question is around HUP 2. Upgrade, because I appreciate some of us were having a conversation with the Chief Infrastructure Officer yesterday, but other events took precedence, but now we're in public and it is an important thing. So obviously we've become aware of this $56 million GST that wasn't accounted for. How does the council check that it's, the financial accounting around its projects? How does it get its own assurance that they are correct? Because it's a significant issue, this.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I might ask Andrea to address that. But I can initially say that there is substantial oversight by the project board, but I'll get Andrea to be specific.
So kia ora, councillors. In terms of the work that was completed for the HUP 2 business case, that went through many iterations with advice over top of that. This particular business case is unique in that there's normally not GST on social housing, and so an assumption was made with some details to ensure that we'd get some tax advice afterwards. That tax advice was inconsistent with what we had booked into the plan because we're constantly updating our financial forecast for the best available information. So that's the process that we have followed. We're usually very confident in that. In this case, we did need to seek external tax advice because we weren't aware of what the answer would be, and that is what we have done in this case.
Thank you, Councillor.
Can I ask another question?
One more, and then I'll put you back.
So following on from that, is there any changes to the council's processes, given this is what's occurred, or are you still considering that? I'm just interested to know, are we doing anything different to prevent this sort of thing happening again?
I think that the really key thing here is that whenever you've got a long-term plan, that those estimates in those reports are estimates. The point around that is they always, the business cases, and many of those business cases still need to come back to the council for approval. So the information in a long-term plan is never 100% perfect because they are statements of intent, in fact. In terms of the information given through business cases, I think what we need to do a bit more of here is ensure that there's early engagement with finance to ensure that we're looking at those numbers within business cases to, ensure that when the business case comes to you, it's got all of that information detailed in it.
Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, kia ora. My questions are around resilience and the slips at Kandala Pool. So I just want to understand, I can see that we've got the business case coming up, and you've said in the Q&A that there will be ongoing reporting, but do officers foresee any costs, like just given what's happened over summer? Will we be taking a fresh look at that, and are we foreseeing any extra costs in regard to the pool upgrade?
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So yeah, I think as the advice was in the Q&A, we're still going through a process in terms of confirming the final designs from a geotechnical perspective, as well as an architectural perspective and a design perspective as well. As we work through that, we will absolutely be reassessing and looking at all of those risks associated with the bank and the design that's been put on the table. The design that's been put on the table does remove some of the structures away from the bank and creates an easier path for the water going past the bottom of that bank as well. So it does remove some of the risk that is known there at the moment. If we find that on a risk basis that the best option is to address some strengthening of the bank, we will have to add that into the costs, and that will be presented back in the business case.
Great, cool. And in the business case, can we also see the historic aspect if there have been slips in the past in that area?
Yes, we will include any historic information relevant to the safety and the structure of that bank, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I know it's really early days, but is there a feeling that the events at Moa Point yesterday are likely to have an impact on the timeline of the sludge program? And just while you're here, and with your permission, Chair, realising what you said earlier, given the severity of the issue, are there any updates you can provide us on the Moa Point situation that we haven't heard? Thank you.
Okay, so through you, Chair, I'll address the first question first, and I'll take your leave if you would like to go beyond the topics. So I was anticipating this question, absolutely. So I just want to make a few points about the events of yesterday and the impact on SMF. So first of all, the SMF project is isolated from the Moa Point wastewater treatment plant, so they are completely separate. So there is no immediate impact or damage on the physical build or the physical construction of the SMF plant. So that's great news. The second point is we've talked extensively with the project director yesterday. The project will continue as planned. It will continue on its program. The key link between the two is that when the SMF plant is commissioned, we need the Moa Point plant to be up and running. So that is the key interplay. But because of the timetable that the SMF plant is on at the moment, we have got time for that. So we have still got about 12 months for the Moa Point treatment plant to get back online and get back up and running. So I'm not anticipating at the moment that that's going to be an impact on the commissioning dates in terms of the interplay between the two. The last point I'd make is that the project director is, of course, keen to get access into the Moa Point site and is actively working with Wellington Water and Veolia to get in there once they can, once it's cleaned up and drained, just to understand what impact has been had on the controls up there in terms of the interplay between the SMF plant and the controls that need to be integrated on the plant. So that would be my main comment. And the second
because
point,
of a public interest, and since he asked, just you can address a bit of that issue.
So all our communication is going through Wellington Water. Wellington Water is leading all the communication on the event. You will be very aware I updated you yesterday on what's actually happened. Our main interest, there's no further updates to give you in terms of access to the plant. I'm waiting to get an update from Wellington Water today. Their main aim now is to try and drain the plant, clean it up, get it safe from a health and safety perspective, and then they need to get in to understand what damage has been done to the electrics, and they need to start understanding where the block is in the outfall pipe. Those are their main objectives in the next week. And their main objective is to get the effluent off the shortfall pipe and into the long outfall pipe out into the Cook Strait. That is absolutely sacrosanct, and that's what they're aiming for. They are doing some good communication. We're working with them and supporting them on the comms. And internally, we are also working with a lot of the events that we know are going on in Island Bay. In terms of, I think there's the Cancer Society have a fundraiser, and there is a few other things going on. So we're in constant contact with those event planners and teams, just helping them understand what they need to do in terms of staying off the beach. And that communication is ongoing. We've also helped them with the establishment of the rahui and ongoing communication with that around how that's going to play out. We will stay in touch with you councillors over the weekend as this plays, and our communication's coming through Moana into a Teams chat that we'll set up for you.
Councillor Compton. You got two. Okay, I will be limiting to two after now. Just to go ahead with one.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very kind. I've got a question actually related to SLEPO, which in the response to question 2 regarding SLEPO, have I read this correctly that if we don't find a way to divert organics out of that landfill, that new cell that we are creating, excuse me if I've got the terminology not quite right, that cell has its potential lifespan is reduced from 20 down to 13 years?
So through you, Chair, Beth is online and she's been digging into this a little more. If that's okay, I might ask Beth to cover that question. Thank you. Beth?
Kia ora koutou. I just see if I can put my camera on. Hello, and through you, Chair. Organics is certainly a part of that in terms of the fill rates. There are also other factors such as fill that may be coming from other centres, such as Porirua, if there's changes in that area. So as part of the waste briefing that I'll be doing for you in the short term, I'm going to be hopefully bringing you at least some basic modelling around some of that, some of those things look like, and the impacts on doing from a fill perspective on doing projects or not doing projects. So, or hopefully be able to provide you with far better information to make some decisions in the very short term.
Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to stay on SLEPO, the Southern Landfill Extension Project, for those that don't know acronyms.
It's a good one.
I've got a couple of questions, please. How long, so since essentially conception on the project, I see we've got 2022 in there, but since conception on the project, how long has it taken to essentially get this up and running and complete?
So we've been working really full time since 2022. Councillor, you may, or the committee may or may not remember that in fact a significant amount of work had gone into a different project at site on stage 4. And then that was changed in 2022 to focus on a SLEPO option. So it does take a really long time to get a new cell into operation. And a significant part of that is the consenting requirements that we need to go through in terms of the ability to get a new consent and understanding what that means, and the ongoing compliance requirements as well. So it is a significant undertaking.
Okay, thank you. To Councillor Osborne's point, going from 2047 down to 2040, I suspect we need to crack on with the next extension consent. The reason I also mention that is, there is a proposal or potential, there's always potential for Porirua landfill to close, potential also for Silverstream, leaving the Wellington region with one landfill to rule them all. I'm just wondering if any potential modelling, I guess, within this program has been done on the traffic modelling through Brooklyn, O'Fero Bay, and how long that landfill would potentially last us.
Through you, Chair, no, we're not at that stage yet. I think we will need to get there though. So the first thing we want to be doing is understanding what that might look like in event of different scenarios. The second thing is to talk about some options that we might have in terms of different scenarios if other centres close and what that might look like an anticipated fill rate for for southern landfill, and then we will need to consider implications in terms of traffic modelling. We're not quite there at that point. Just going back to your first point around considering extensions, that's one of the things that I will be bringing and having a high-level chat with you about next week when we do our briefing, or whenever it's going to be around what the options might be for longer-term options at the site.
Thank you.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. Just going back to the sludge plant, and there's a question mark over the quality of the steel. So is that steel already in place, or I know there's been a problem with steel across the country. I'm assuming it's the same problem, that it's not as good as it's cracked. Well, perhaps that's the wrong word to use, as it's supposed to be. But does it mean we have to go in and replace steel which is already in place?
So the project director is working through that with the JV. There's a number of issues. There's the base plates, which is concrete, there's the steel, there's the facade, and there's the roof. So there's a number of quite detailed issues sitting in there. But as I said before, it is being worked through. I'm just flagging it as red because it impacts program, but it is being actively worked on. I can probably come back to you with more in-depth detail about the steel because I'm not across the particular steel issue and what's driving that.
Thank you. So just also, so if the work has to be done to, for example, remove it, who picks up the cost?
So that's that comes through as a variation to the contract, but that's very, very carefully negotiated in terms of time and where the responsibility lies. That's
so what are the options?
Sorry?
I mean, what are the possible areas where the responsibility might lie?
That gets. I kind of don't want to go into that in a public forum because that gets into negotiations with the JV and the contract in terms of the relationship between them, the designer, and the suppliers.
Okay.
So it gets quite complex. But we have got complete confidence in our new project director to really drive into negotiating that sort of scenario on our behalf.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mayor Little.
Thank you. First is probably more of a request. I appreciate getting the red, amber, green indications. That's very helpful. I don't think we need a historical record of the indications. That's a post-implementation review thing, so it's good just to get what the current state is and perhaps what the previous state is. So hopefully officers won't waste their time gathering information we don't need in reports for the time we need them. My question is in relation to the sludge plant. We have a new project director who's been on, one or two, who've been in place for nearly a month. I'm just wondering whether they've given any indication in terms of the due diligence they've done on the prognosis of the project and being completed and the time we expect.
Through you, Chair. So it's great to have the two, the Mayor is referring to two project directors because we do have two. They're job sharing, which is very modern. They have been in place for 3 weeks now. Yep, absolutely. They've given me some indications of their initial due diligence, which I can share. So they've said that they've got some good people on the job. The plant has been designed to and will be built to a high standard with an above average degree of redundancy and flexibility. They're very impressed by the design space. The cost plus approach to our contract has driven cost in, which they are going to start looking at in terms of how that can be managed in terms of the way the contract was set up. They are going to work with the JV to get more weekly engagement and communication around some of their change and some of the things that they are facing. They want to improve that relationship a whole lot more cleanly. And they want to improve JV monitoring of kind of their work as well. So that's some of the things they've indicated to me to start with. They've looked at the program. They'll come back to me in about a few days' time with some insights into the program deliverability. We had a contract date initially of dry commissioning of July 26. That has been shifted to November 26. The investigation they're doing right now is to look at all the issues that are sitting in front of them to really make sure, is that feasible or does that need to go out a bit further so they can be very honest with us and me in terms of what the future dates are going to be. And that is their focus right now.
Councillor Tifanbaka.
Yeah, just regarding the Hub 2 project, obviously, with the GST, at what point did we know about the GST? Because I'm not quite sure. This is why it would be quite good to have past history of whether it was green or not, because if it was green at the last update and it's green now, somewhere in between those two times we've had a $57 or $56 million saving. So what was the timing between officers knowing about it and coming to councillors with the information? Because obviously the whole value in this significant projects update is it's got to be accurate because we have to know what we're in for.
So we definitely take that very seriously in terms of bringing you information as soon as we know, and we did that with SMF last year, so that's our intent going forward. I might just see if Peter can just give us the specifics.
Kia ora, councillors. So the tax advice, I believe, was received in November of last year, so effectively it was brought to councillors in the subsequent quarterly report being last week.
Was there not one last year, at the end of last year, where we had an update just like this? Am I mistaken? I thought that we'd had one of these last year, towards the end of last year. And if so, was that highlighted as green or was it red? Because obviously you guys would have known there was an issue. So I'm just trying to make sure that what we're signing off on here is a true reflective of the status of the projects.
Yeah, we definitely hear your point. We've got to make sure that information comes immediately, and we'll make sure that does happen.
Thank you. Now we are into the second round. Councillor Calvert.
Just questions about Kandala Pool. There was nothing in the report about potential slips, and I'm not aware of anything that's happened in not in recent years, but in past years. And I know that the council's advisory group has a couple of local engineers on there as well. So has there been recent slips on the banks, or is it?
Through you, Chair. I'm not aware of any recent slips. Historically, and that could be historically going back a long time, the manager of the operation up there informs me that there has been in the past some movement of some land in that space, and we have had geotechnical assessments done before, basically saying that there is a risk profile of that bank that needs to be put into consideration for the design. At this stage, we haven't got any new information to suggest that there is some new risk that's been discovered or that we need to take account of. So we're basically working through our normal process of we've come up with a conceptual design. As I said before, it moves some buildings away from the bank anyway and opens up the stream more. That should help in terms of mitigation against any of that type of risk. But as we go through that process, we will absolutely make sure that we are aligned with the geotechnical risk assessment of that bank. And if there is any change to that, we'll bring that to you.
Thank you. Lucky last, Councillor Compton.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the Southern Landfill, a Q&A question 2 around essentially asking developers to come in and offload their soil, which I think is great. It's not a question so much as a comment, but can I suggest that we utilise the Civil Contractors Wellington to ensure that there's a fair distribution of this opportunity across all contractors within the Wellington region, not a select few?
Noted. Thank you, Councillor. I will take that back to the team.
Okay.
I might just get in touch with you, Councillor, just to check I've got the wording quite right, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fuhn, now you are the lucky last.
Thank you, Chair. Just back to the delay, if there's any further delay with the sludge plant being commissioned, does that work in with the current landfill and using the current system? And also, how are we communicating that to the local community as we go through that?
Through you, Chair. So you'll know that one of the key issues, an interplay between the current landfill and the sludge plant, was the resource consent for the disposal of sludge. So the recent resource management reform announcements have indicated that the legislation has extended the expiry date of most consents across the country to accommodate the RMA reform process. And that expiry date means that the expiry for the consent for sludge to go into the landfill is now out to the 31st of December 2027, which is great news because we no longer have that deadline of needing to renew our resource consent for the existing landfill. So amazing. I'm not sure what communication is going on with the community around right now, but I can come back to you on that, Councillor. Okay.
Okay, Councillor Ruti.
Thank you. I just want to ask, I've previously asked in workshops about the car parking, and I have now sent through an email requesting more information about the car parking. I just want to flag this in an aspect that, I look forward to receiving a reply. But just to clarify that I am particularly interested in car parking before the library was closed and what public car parking is available when it opens, and the changes, particularly numbers restrictions. And latest I've added to that is what cycle parking will be available for library users and Tanaka. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So thank you very much for that clarification. It's much appreciated. Are we talking within the Tanako basement area, i.e. underneath the library, or are you talking on the streets outside as well?
Started out with the question was Harris Street, Victoria Street, Wakefield Street, and the parks around, and in particular the timings of the car parks in the front, which people use to drop off and pick up. But also, my question in particular was also for Tanako in the basement, and I understand that's changed a little, so I was just asking for a bit of clarification on how it's changed.
Okay,
Thank you.
Clear on that? Thank you. I think we're clear on that. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, officers. And now, is there a mover for the motion? Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Thank you to all the staff this morning for being on hand and for being able to provide some comprehensive answers. I know it's appreciated here, and the City Strategy and Delivery Committee. I want to just note, I do appreciate the particular detail we were able to get into the sludge plant. I think that is sitting at the top of most of our thinking as a high-risk project, and Wellingtonians want to see that delivered and opened sooner rather than later. So getting that update, I think we look forward to being able to engage with the project directors, directors though, to get that assurance though from the coalface of what we knew or didn't know and moving forward. And I'll leave it there.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Yep, Councillor Roja. Do you want to speak? Okay. Further debate? Councillor Tiefenbacher.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'm actually going to vote against this. I know it's just accepting papers, but I feel that the fact that the last quarterly update seemed not to highlight an issue along the lines of $56 million on the HUP 2, to me suggests that there are massive issues in the reliability of this report at the moment. I believe that the officers are doing a good job to a certain extent in that they are looking at continually improving, but I want to see that improvement before I feel really comfortable that we're getting the right information passed on to us. I just feel that to have probably 5 months before we really found out about, 3 months maybe, before we actually found out that we had an issue, the ability to go and find a $56 million saving highlights concerns for me within how we are doing things. As I said, I actually have a lot of faith in the ELT to be able to fix this, but I want to see it fixed, and I think we need to send a very clear message that as the governing body, it's not acceptable to hide stuff, it's not acceptable to come to us at the last minute, and in particular, if we're going to trust this report, we have to know that everything is in there, that the green, the amber, the red is accurate. If we can't accept that, and we can't trust that, we're the guys that have to basically face up to the public when something comes out that's a negative. So it's a protest vote more than anything else, and as I said, this is not a direct insult on any of the officers of the ELT, but I do think it's important that as a governing body we say, look, there's so much as a council we're not doing well, let's actually make a difference, and let's get things right. Thank you.
Pui Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say that I support what Councillor Tiefenbacher is saying. And I support all of what he said, actually. I aren't going to vote with you, though, but I think your protest vote is a good step.
Cool. I don't see further debate, so right of reply, Deputy Mayor.
Firstly, can I just ask whoever's phone is pinging incessantly about every 30 seconds if you'd like to put it on to silent? I don't know whose phone that is, but it's incredibly annoying. To the right of reply, look, I take the point, Councillor Tiffin-Bucker. We've been on a break and this news has come back to us, but I will say when you say staff are hiding something, that will be taken as a direct insult. I know it wasn't the intention of what you're doing, but if you're saying things are being actively hidden, that will come through that way. So I do think you need to take a bit of care into this. We've had January off, we've had half of December, and in that, this should have been highlighted sooner completely. Respect the right to protest vote. I've certainly done it myself in the past, so I'd be a hypocrite to in any way say that you're not entitled to do so. But I just think we do need to be careful about inclinations or implications around the flow of information, and otherwise I'll take it to a vote. Thank you.
I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in
I
favour?
think, can we have a division on this, please?
What is the division? Receiving the information and...
No, it just means that you record that who votes for and against you.
I move the motion carried. Now we go for break and come back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Item 2.3, establish a joint working group on regional amalgamation options. Please welcome Baz Government to introduce the report. And Moana Maki.
Good morning, councillors. Just by way of a quick introduction, you'll be aware that central government is looking for change from local government. They want to see more efficient and more effective service delivery. They've got a proposal out for consultation called Simplifying Local Government. What it entails is removal of the regional council, the establishment of a combined territorial board, and the requirement for that board to set up a reorganisation plan within a 2-year period. Now, the Mayoral Forum's looked at that. They're interested in running an expedited process, a Wellington region-specific process. That's what's outlined in the paper. It involves the establishment of a joint working group to work through the requirements, and in essence, that's what the paper is about. So it's the recommendation to establish a joint working group and start engaging with central government. The details are in the paper. I'll leave it there, but happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have a question before we move to debate? Councillor Young.
Do we have any idea of the timeline, speaking as one who is keen to amalgamate as soon as possible?
In essence, to have everything done by the next election.
So the next election would be...
Local
so,
council,
yeah, so the next local body election would be the Greater Wellington, whatever we're going to call ourselves. Fantastic.
Okay, next is Councillor Osborne, but can I just clarify that what you're saying is there is a potential for the next election to happen under the new regime?
So can I just intervene here? I mean, in the end, this is, and Baz done a great job in Moana, obviously. We have this thing where we insist on officers speaking to papers. This is an inherently political paper. The government has made a policy announcement. That is a political thing. The mayors of the region have met together in their political capacity, and they've made a political judgment. This is a political issue. Can I just say on that, because I justifiably heard some grimaces just now, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. This is about opening up the debate or the discussion. As mayors have said, we need to explore this, but there needs to be a lot of data gathering, discussion, putting together what a program of engagement might look like before we even think about when this might take effect. So I would just urge us not to get too far ahead of ourselves. This is starting a process, but who knows what snags might be identified. Look, there are big challenges for some of the councils in the region. You talk to Upper Hutt City Council, they would tell you their biggest challenge right now is the cost of climate change adaptation. You talk to Porirua City Council, their concern is about their future sort of viability. So there's some big challenges ahead. So I just say let's start the process. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. And in terms of what a program of work might look like, including public engagement, that is yet to be developed and to come back to this council.
Cool. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if at the official level, I don't know how well your relationship is with DIA, but have you had any indication of when you expect a bill might be introduced to the House, noting that it's February of an election year, so August is about the end of third reading sort of time?
They have indicated around the middle of the year.
For introduction.
Interesting. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. I understand that the mayors want to look at amalgamation, but under the legislation as it's drafted, do we also need to have a plan B should an amalgamation process not come about in terms of still setting up this mayoral forum thing for regional councils?
So in essence, the Simplifying Local Government, there is a requirement to do a reorganisation plan. So the combined territorial boards, if that legislation passes, there is a requirement to do that. In essence, what the Mayoral Forum is asking for is to do a regional, Wellington region-specific exercise and to do that a little bit faster.
Okay, but do we also still need to have like a plan B if because amalgamation is a big thing and there'll probably be many barriers, just in terms of having some sort of interim governance for the regional council as proposed as stage 1 in the new legislation?
Councillor Randall, it's the Mayor here. Yes, that's already catered for in the proposed legislation. There's the combined territorial board step. And in many respects, it's that the mayors, when we discussed it, we were keen to avoid because that's expected to be in place for 2 years at the most. And the critical piece of work is then putting together what a future arrangement might look like, and it runs the risk of keeping the focus off what we want the regional council to do, the function we want them to do, which is good environmental regulation and protection as well as transport coordination. And we thought there are greater efficiencies to leapfrog that process. But in the event that we start this work and we can't find an appropriate way forward, then the plan B is the legislation the government has proposed, which is we have a combined territorial board.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Fun.
Yeah, kia ora. Just in the the Q&A.
It's kind of the same. It's kind of.
My brain went somewhere else completely. There was a proposal for a DIA report on the efficiencies from the amalgamation of Auckland. Is there any commitment that we know of for them to do a report? And if not, can we continue to ask for one?
You're quite right. There was supposed to be a report on Auckland amalgamation that never eventuated. Are you asking for a report to be made available on Auckland or on subsequent?
I guess my request is that we continue. If we're going down this track, it would be really useful to have that report from DIA. Yeah.
We could certainly advocate for it.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Pui Kelly.
Thank you for you, Mr. Chair. Will there be a referendum that will go out to everyone? Would that be a part of the solution or the consultation and the discussion?
So the DIA proposal in terms of simplifying local government does not have a binding referendum associated with it. In essence, it's the combined territorial boards doing the work on a reorganisation plan. That there is a requirement to do extensive consultation about that and to get the community across that and get their feedback built into the proposal. Then it goes to the minister. The minister works with the local government commission, but at this point in time, there's no reference to a binding referendum.
The reason why I'm asking that is that's really interesting, but it's probably debate, eh? Or do I talk to it now?
I think the other thing worth noting is it's currently just a proposal in terms of simplifying local government. They're asking for feedback on that. Yeah. We've got a draft submission underway that's coming to committee in a couple of weeks' time, so we'll have the ability to provide our views to that and inform DIA of what we think would benefit and help shape the legislation.
I will, through you, Mr. Chair, if it's okay. Yep. The reason why I'm saying that is that because it is referenced in here, the information that went out to ratepayers in Porirua, and you've referenced that 55% thought that it was a good idea. But when that went out to the residents in Porirua, the Mayor of Porirua was really clear that it wasn't amalgamation, and if that was on the cards, that there would be a referendum before that happened. So it's interesting to hear what you're saying now. I understand what you're saying, but it's good to have that clarity.
So the existing legislation that currently is in place, which is working through the local government commission, that has a requirement for a binding referendum. But there is a little bit of narrative in the proposal from DIA that talks about it being a minister's decision and them working with the local government commission.
Councillor Roger.
Yeah, recognising that the work in terms of future governance options would have to happen anyway, I asked some questions around what sort of staff time was going to be dedicated to investigating these options. Just wondering, did you have an idea in terms of number of FTEs or anything like that, even if it's not budgetary?
We haven't at this point in time, so that's a bit of work that still needs to be done. So, and the first step is in essence getting a view from the councils in terms of whether they want to participate. Once that's, if that goes through, and once we know what that looks like, we'll be looking at drawing on resources from the combined councils. In terms of this council for the first phase, we'd be looking to use existing resources, so we'd be using existing FTEs and just reprioritising them.
Yeah. And in terms of the work that those existing FTEs would have otherwise been doing, do you have any information about that would be deprioritised to complete this work?
That's right. So in essence, what would happen is we would be coming back to you. We've got the policy and strategy work program that is due to come to you in a couple of weeks. Once a decision is made on this paper, we would have to look through that and come back with recommendations in that space.
I don't see any further hands, so thank you to Moana Meke and Baz Kaufman. Is there a mover for the motion? May I call Mayor Little to move the motion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I support this. I commissioned the work and I was the one at the mayoral forum in the discussions. And it comes back to the drivers for this go beyond just the government's policy announcements at the end of last year, but we should remind ourselves what those announcements were. There was the simplifying local government, which was about, in a sense, rationalising regional councils, removing the elected members and replacing them with the mayors and the regions, and then with a requirement to take 2 years to prepare a plan on what the future looks like. And the signal is pretty clear that an expectation of consolidation and rationalisation. On top of that, we also have the consolidation of water services under the local water done well policy. That's going to take a big chunk of assets and therefore intellectual effort and energy out of this council to a new entity, and our control over that will be through partnership agreement and our shared ownership of that company, but that is all. And then on top of that, you've got the RMA reform, the legislation for which has now entered Parliament, with an expectation that that is going to lead to considerable rationalisation and consolidation of planning and consenting processes between councils, particularly neighbouring councils. So that is, all of that is going to make a big difference to the functioning of this council and our neighbours. On that basis, it makes sense to explore a future that might involve anything from amalgamation to integration to close partnership to whatever. All councils are under pressure to reduce cost and ensure efficiency, and this kind of forms the basis of that as well. So there are a number of drivers of it. It is kind of its time at the moment. And if the discussions don't, as a result of the information sharing, don't get anywhere, then we do have their fallback position, which is what the government will legislate for, and we'll have to try and make that work. But there is an opportunity for us to bring some coherence and cohesion to planning across the region in a way that we struggle to do at the moment. And on that basis, I support the paper and urge your support too.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Calvert. Is there any debate? No. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I just, first of all, just wanted to thank the Mayor for working with myself and my colleagues from the Green Party on the amendments to the paper. I think they are good whether they've got to and improve the recommendations from my perspective. Look, I think it's prudent and smart to look at the future governance arrangements of our region, regardless of what central government is saying. In a way, we did it 10, 15 years ago. There's no harm in doing it again. But I do just want to stress that we shouldn't be predetermining the outcome, and I don't think we are in any way, but that's an important thing to note. And In terms of the central government direction that's coming, that's leading us towards this, it's probably worthwhile noting as well that there's an election coming later on this year, and in terms of predetermining outcomes, that one's certainly not predetermined at this stage. So that's really all I wanted to say. I'm happy to vote in support of this paper and see where it gets to us, leads.
Any further debate? Councillor Corbett.
Look, I'm very happy to support this paper. I think, having conversations with a lot of people around Wellington, we know, and people when they say Wellington, they don't just mean Wellington City. They could live in the hut, they could live out in Porirua, and often they refer to themselves that they are part of Wellington. And if you look at it, people work, live and play across, even if nothing else, just the 4 metros in this area. And we hear often the frustrations of, in particular, of our trades. The lines between Wellington City and Porirua is just an imaginary line on the map. That's all it is. The pipes connect, the roads connect, the builders are working in a property in Wellington City and then they're working in Porirua, and sometimes under completely different sets of rules. So I think it's really important that we explore and we take the lead. We are proactive as opposed to reactive to whatever the government of the day requires us, and to take a joined up approach. Now, there may not be efficiencies in terms of dollars, but I can see that we will be, if it does move forward in some form where we can come together better, we will have a stronger voice with government from an advocacy perspective. So look, I'm very supportive, and a lot of my constituents are saying, we want you to look at this. And I think we owe justice, but we also have got to prioritise our resources to enable this to happen appropriately and cohesively. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor McNulty.
Thank you, Chair. And sort of similar sentiments. I think it's really incumbent just to understand what the status quo is if we don't do this work. The 5 councillors from the Poiniki ward, so that's Darren Ponter, Yadina Saw, Tom James, Sarah Free and Simon Wolfe, would be replaced by an incredibly stretched Mayor Little. And the 2 councillors of the Porirua Tawa ward, Claire Johnstone and Phil Rhodes, would be replaced by an incredibly stretched Mayor Baker. And 7 directly elected representatives would become 2 appointments. And with the utmost respect to my mayoral colleagues, I don't think that's a good outcome. So with that reality ahead of us, it's incumbent that we explore the options, and yes, amalgamation naturally has to be one of those. I think being in the northern suburbs, I certainly represent residents who interact with the Wellington region in a bit of a different way than I imagine than some of those in, say, Te Aro or Seaturn or Berrenport might. For many, Porirua Pool is actually the community asset we look at rather than the Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre. Shopping in Petone is an easier option than Cuba Street. And as we've learnt with our water infrastructure, lines are just an arbitrary construct on a map. And as Councillor Osborne, you alluded to, I think despite the government's direction on governance of regional councils, it's actually well worth us to explore what are the best governance arrangements for the Wellington region. And of course we have those RMA reforms coming which are further watering down those differences between LGAs anyway, so it just seems that it's the right time. So I welcome this paper, and I suppose really unless you have a strong view that those regional council representatives that I mentioned are better replaced by unelected mayors, then I'd encourage everyone else around this table to do so as well.
Councillor Foon.
Yeah, kia ora. I'm also happy to support the paper, but also thankful to the Mayor for undertaking to just put a few changes to broaden the scope and the direction. I think that's very healthy and important. But I do just want to acknowledge here that there has been a report from the New Zealand Infrastructure Commission, and that there is no evidence that they found that bigger is better, and also that local government in Aotearoa is the most heavily centralised in the OECD already. So I think just coming from that point, what we know already, but it is really important that we flush out a view from our own region. So I'm pleased to see us moving in that direction. But I think also in that I'm pleased to see the amendment that acknowledges Wellingtonians' lens and point of view. I think it's very important that we understand that, as well as the impact on our council and city, as well as looking at the greater good for the region. So thank you for the work, thank you for the openness, and look forward to hearing and the milestones that we will be reported back to on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Food. Just from my side, to acknowledge the hard work from the Mayor's office, especially David Hawkins, Alex Marriott, and Phil Reid, in working with other councillors in providing some of the amendments that came to fruition and moved as a substantive in this paper. And now I'll give the Mayor right of reply before we go to vote.
Thank you, Chair. Look, not a great deal to add, but I think the points that have been made are all good points. I think one of the things that was alluded to is the way people who live in the region kind of operate on a week-to-week basis. So 40% roughly of Hutt Valley residents, and I think a similar proportion from Porirua, on 5 days a week are working in Wellington. So this is a region, and we are a city that already naturally accommodates a whole bunch of people across the region, and there's a question about how much longer kind of the artificial demarcations are a constructive way to run a city and a region. So look, appreciate colleagues' support and appreciate the work with our colleagues in the Green Party. I think there's some good changes made there, and this is about knowing that for Wellington residents, it's been, 50 odd years since we last sort of had a debate about amalgamation at least, and it's timely to do so again, but I'm conscious equally that we've got to have that debate, and anything we do has to take people with us. Thank you.
I now put the motion for vote. Press 1 for support. To say no. I declare the motion carried. Agenda Item 2.4, CTT Bridge and former capital E. Please welcome James Roberts and Farzad Zamani.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. This paper addresses the future intent for the former Capital E building and associated city-to-sea bridge structures. As discussed in the briefing last week, a direction on the Council's intent for these structures is necessary at this time for the following reasons. First, as you heard earlier in the committee today, the Building Amendment Bill is being progressed by central government and has a meaningful impact on the likely status of the former Capital E building, ultimately creating additional options for the future of this building. Second, we're now in the closing stages of all the work in the Tanako Civic Square program. All current projects will complete this calendar year. In order for the city to finalise this program and enjoy the outputs from it, this final key element needs to be addressed. The options in the paper enable Council to conclude this work aligned to the conclusion of the remainder of the program. Third, Council has revoked the previous decision on these structures, and direction is now required to address the structures. And fourth, clarity of intent for these structures enables the program team to complete final planning and forecasting for the total cost of the Tanako program, enabling the program to release savings, which is relevant to the Council's current financial planning work. We'll take the paper as read.
Thank you, James. And Councillor Fern.
Kia ora. I'd just like to thank Sylvia, the submitter this morning, and so I'm just going to ask if we could help address some of the concerns that were raised regarding the artworks and brickworks around the bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. I've asked Faz if he can clarify that.
Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors, through the chair. The first point regarding the artworks, all the artworks will be retained and restored and renewed, so none of the artworks will be removed. That's including Paramatch's artwork. That will be restored. We have number of rotten timber, so we have to replace those timbers and make sure that the artwork is, updated and refreshed. There is the Revi Thompson's pyramid artwork. There's a number of broken tiles on that pyramid that we need to replace, so that will be done. And then there is Matt Penny's artwork, the two sculptures at the bottom of the steps. There is some moss kind of grown on top of the Omoro stone, so we have to basically remove and refresh those sculptures. I understand there were a number of concerns regarding the paving pattern on the top of Capitol E and the bridge. I can assure you that the pattern will be retained, so we're not changing the artwork on top of the bridge in terms of the pavers. However, we have a number of issues regarding the quality and the material of the pavers. These pavers are quite heavy. We have to remove all the pavers from the top of Capitol E in order to strengthen the roof. So we have a concrete overlay, so we have to remove the pavers to do the concrete overlay. The pavers are heavy, so we have to shift to a lighter pavers, so thinner pavers. In order to carry that load, we'd have to basically mix them with the stone pavers so they can carry the weight. The pattern will be retained, but it will be a combination of recycled clay pavers and a stone pavers. That's one thing. Those clay pavers are not reproduced anymore, so we can't get new versions of them, so we have to buy different pavers. The cost of retrofit of those pavers is quite expensive. That's why we decided to retain the pattern, but change the type of pavers we're gonna use, and that's been shown in the drawings. I need to note that the way that the drawings are presented, we couldn't present the exact form of the sculptures, so it may be misleading, but all the sculptures and artwork will be retained.
Fantastic. Good to hear that. And you have a follow-up, Councillor Foon?
Yeah, so far as just on the Paramatch work, like I know that over time people have been concerned about the degrading of that. Can you just explain the style of the artwork, but what can we do to make sure that it lasts the next duration of time? And have we planned and budgeted for that?
Yes. We have planned and budgeted for restoration of Paramatch's artwork. We've been talking to Para's family for the last year. So in terms of restoration of that artwork, we will talk further with them in terms of what can we do and what can't we do, considering the timber that has been used basically rots in the conditions. There is a question, can we apply a form of a kind of a layer of something that protect the timber in the long term? Some of the timber needs to be fully removed and basically new timber to be added. I just need to note that this has been done in 2024 for some of the seating, so we will do the same thing. In terms of the other artworks, again, we will work with the families and representatives of the artists and the whānau to make sure that they're happy with the progress and the way that we restore the artwork. Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Would like to know how the decision was reached to not present an option for the Capital E building that aligns with the approach that we've used in terms of seismic resilience and elsewhere in Tanako.
So, Councillor, sorry, are you referring to the objective to go to 100% MBS for the Town Hall in Te Matapihi? Is that what you're referring to?
In paragraph 46, it says this option would require a higher tolerance of seismic risk and is a departure from the Council's previous approach to seismic resilience within Tanako. And I'm just wondering why it was and how the decision was reached not to present us with an option that would align with our previous approach.
The reason for that is purely financial. Going above the level of strengthening that we're proposing needs to address the liquefaction on the Capital E. When we enter the ground conditions, as you all know about Town Hall and other projects, when we have to do ground improvements, the cost of that project will be extremely high and will be extremely unaffordable, as we've seen with other projects. And that's why we decided to kind of choose a strengthening solution that address the most vulnerable seismic aspects of the building, but not the ground conditions.
Follow up.
Thank you. And then just in terms of an option that was obviously voted in favour of by the former council in terms of demolishing the City to Sea Bridge altogether, I'm just wondering if timing around that option potentially being delivered was the only rationale for it not being presented today as an option.
Do you mean the ration? Sorry, Councillor, may I ask for some clarification? Do you mean
in the discussion in the paper around viable options and why certain options weren't considered viable, the option to demolish, the rationale given is that it wouldn't be done in time for the rest of Tanako to be finished, and that was the reason it was not considered viable.
So we have been working based on the revocation of the previous decision.
Sorry, my understanding of the revocation of the previous decision was we were back at a blank slate and we were going to consider options for the City to Sea Bridge now. Is that incorrect?
So demolition has been listed in the document with some information around our perspective on demolition, and it's not one of the two options that we've presented as for this paper.
Cool. Councillor Tiefenbacher.
My understanding is that the cost of demolition would have been quite substantially more than the options you've put up for us. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So the change in the Building Act has facilitated the fact that there are now better options than the original suggestion.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Corbett.
Am I correct in assuming that with this paper we don't talk about if we'd had demolished it, what would it cost to build a new bridge to replace the one we demolished? Because I don't think we've ever had any figures that might add to if we wanted to put a bridge back.
That's correct, yeah. I think when we had the discussions over this at the end of 2024, we had some very, very high-level ballpark amounts. We talked to around $15 million, but that would have been on top of the cost of doing the demolition.
So we probably essentially saved even more money, potentially, yeah.
I don't see any further question. Thank you so much to Farzad and James. And now, may I get a mover for the motion? I can see Councillor Young looking at me. That's yours.
Thank you. So, well, we're getting there. So, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the bridge because it's not loved by everybody, and I admit I've been on a journey about it. I still don't think it's sort of not the Rialto Bridge, but irrespective of its design, most agree it provides a wonderful access way between the Civic Square, Tanako, and our glorious waterfront, and far preferable to a pedestrian crossing across a busy road or the possibility of a replacement bridge one day when our finances are in a healthier state than they're going to be for the next few years. It's been a complex process with many technical issues and possibly even more opinions than the issues. I'd like to thank the officers who understood that the council is here to represent Wellingtonians and worked tirelessly to implement the work required to save the bridge. Dr. Faz Zamani is how I say it, yeah. Easton Burke and, of course, Chief Operating Officer James Roberts. But also, there are lots of other people who have been involved on the other side. It's been a very lively campaign. I'd like to recognise the advocacy of the Civic Trust and Sylvia Allen here today and Stuart Niven. I think he's got a direct line to me. And then also the Save the City to Sea Bridge. And it's a shame that our chair is not wearing the T-shirt that he showed me earlier.
Thank you so much to Sylvia for the gift.
But also the advocacy and tireless and phone calls from former councillor Helene Ritchie, who's now the chair of the Civic Trust, and recently retired Iona Pannett, a fellow Lambton councillor. And particularly my colleague, Councillor Nuruddin Abdurrahman, who's just shown his T-shirt and possibly his abs, for his work in bringing the amendment that saved the bridge. Thank you, Nuruddin. And also his graciousness in asking me to propose, what do you call this thing? Open the paper, you know. Move, thank you. Because, and I said it should be you. Anyway, that's the way he goes. And I'd also like to thank the councillors who listen to Wellingtonians, because it has been a hell of a campaign, but we are elected to represent people. So sometimes, even if you don't love things, like I'm not mad about the artworks, you still have to advocate for them because that's what people want. So not everyone is happy with the final proposal, but that's democracy. It's impossible to please all of the people all of the time, and I'm very happy with the outcome that we have settled on. Thank you to all the people who have been involved. At last, Wellington's premier public space is being returned to the city. The bridge has been reopened. The former Capital E structure will have a new life. The Central Library opens next month, the City Gallery later this year, and the beautiful Town Hall reopens next year. The City Council, so Wellington is having a heart transplant. It's great. I have pleasure in moving the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Young. May I ask now Councillor Compton to second, and she also moved an amendment which was included as a substantive, so you can speak to that one as well.
Thank you, Chair. So I have the pleasure in seconding this paper. My amendment was to direct officers to progress securing a tenant for this space at the earliest practical opportunity. For me, given the length of time that this building has been unoccupied, and a desire for us to have a beating heart in the Civic Square, I want to see this space occupied as soon as possible. You know, we've got things coming online and being activated, and I'd like to see this as part of that. So it is a pleasure to second this paper. And I also would like to acknowledge that we have had interest from Experience Wellington in this space, so it shows there is a desire for the community to use the space and have whatever's going to go on there. So, yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Councillor Fawn, you're next.
Yeah, kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Young, for your mahi and advocacy, and thank you, Councillor Compton, for making sure that we've got that direction to move quickly. I totally support that, and will be happy to support this paper, although I've got to say the City to Sea Bridge has left me with a slightly sour kind of taste or memory. And I feel like it was one discussion we possibly really didn't need to drag the city through, the iwi through, and we even reached Sam Neill with it. We had a lot of arguments last year, and I would have preferred not to have had this one. But, you know, as a council, we were caught between earthquake standards, timing, trying to get it complete, you know, to complete the whole of Te Ngākau, and costs. So I appreciate that it's been a really tricky position to be in. But I think what I wanted to highlight today was that these decisions do cost. And so the decision has probably cost us over $1 million to make. And I think we can't really afford for every decision we need to make to cost $1 million. So I guess that's my plea today, is just to remember that this is what it does cost us. And it does cost our public more in time and the reputation of council. So while I'm really pleased to be landing on a decision today, it has left me with a sour taste, but perhaps something really Wellington-centric in capital E will sweeten up the future of the City to Sea Bridge for me. So thanks everyone for your mahi. Kia ora.
Thank you so much. And may I say a few things now before I go to the next speaker? And last year it has been a very stressful for a lot of our communities and for officers as well. And we know the friction that was going on. And I also note that I've never seen such a quality submissions in my last 4 years in this council. And the City to Sea Bridge people who came and do the submission, they did a lot of great things. I just must acknowledge that and say thank you for putting your time and your energy and convincing some of us. For me, I don't have much attachment to that bridge, but I was convinced by what they presented to us. And for some of you to change your mind and now to support it, I think that would also need a courage, and I really appreciate that courage from all of you. Someone who's not here with us today, and a councillor who's been a very long time advocate of this, is Councillor Iona Panet, and we need to remember and acknowledge her as well, and she has always been an advocate for her community. And when we make this decision, we also note that this council is building a bridge with our community. We are connecting. We are not just only reserving the bridge, the physical bridge. We are also building a bridge to the community. This is a council that listens, and I am sure all acknowledge that as well. And thanks to the mayor and to all of you in working together and this issue for officers. I know has been a very stressful period for you for that as well, sometimes getting a bit of personal, and I really appreciate how you navigated through this and getting us here. With that, I don't see anyone else is speaking as well, so I will ask Deputy Mayor to sum it up before we go to right of reply.
Yeah, look, cultural Philistine here. I never have and will see the appeal and the art and the love that many have for this bridge. But nonetheless, I take the passion and I look at Clause 5, and that is my dollar sign that makes this a no-brainer to come and vote for the fact that there is 17 million of options. We've still got our hole and sludge plant at my point to deal with. We now probably have a very expensive bill at the wastewater treatment plant that we are also going to have to deal with. And if it comes down to leaving a bridge that does have some residual earthquake risk up in place, but that we can address those more pressing water issues, then it's an absolute no-brainer. So I appreciate the advocacy and the support that has gone around this. Just like beer, you know, some people like me understand that a VB is great, some people just don't get it. It is the same with this bridge. We have different views when it comes down to art and artwork, but the savings make this such an easy paper to vote for. Kia ora.
I don't know what is VV beer. Do they have halal one? Okay. Can I ask my Councillor Young a right of reply if you want?
Yeah, just briefly. So thank you everyone for your support, including those who've changed their mind to support it, which is really appreciated. It is, as Councillor Foon said, it is really sad that it was such a bloody process, and I think we have all learnt a lot of lessons through it. But we got there in the end, and I think, as Councillor Abdurrahman pointed out, this is a city that listens. We don't always listen. I think we're getting better at listening, and it's good to have a bright light when we've got rather a lot of other gloomy things around. So I hope that you will support this, and we can get on to getting our civic square back. Thank you.
Now I put the motion for a vote. Please press 1 if it's yes, no, 2. As carried. Agenda item 2.5, decision register updates and upcoming reports. Please welcome Liam Hodges to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just take it as read, councillors. Happy to take questions.
Any question? No. Mover. Deputy Mayor, speak. Seconder. Councillor Foon. Any debate? No. Okay, let's go for vote. I declare the motion carried. Now, let's go to draw. Unuhia ki te uru tapunui, kia wātia ki mama te nako te tenina na tiwaroa. I te rārata kotu kia rā o rongo, whakare arakārekonga, kia wātia, ara kwa wātia. I declare the meeting closed.